Welcome back to 2K Away. Well, welcome back. I'm Payton, this is my sister Paige, and we used to be 2,000 miles away from one another, but now we're not, but we're keeping the name, and we talk about true crime and all things creepy and macabre. Mm-hmm. Now, before we get into this, I just want to announce again, we will be at the Montgomery County Bicentennial in Butler, Illinois on June
5th?
5th, thank you.
We just said it and you didn't remember again.
No. You expect me to remember everything. God. We will be there. We will have some merch. We will have some mics. We want people to talk with us. We'll be live on Facebook. It's like an all-day thing, correct?
11 to 7.
Yeah, all day. So we will be there and we hope to see you there. So I want to get that out of the way real quick because that's the last day that I can officially announce that, because this episode is going to be a little bit long. Paige kind of hinted at it last week with the Changeling episode, and I'm glad we got to have a little bit of fun before we went into this horrific shit. So this week is going to be the Wineville Chicken Coup Murders. Now, these are really bad. The Wineville Chicken Coup Murders, which is how they're known, or the Wineville Chicken Murders, which sounds completely different.
Yeah.
They're known as both, which I'm like, chicken murders? That sounds like you're murdering chickens. They were a series of abductions and murders of young boys. This took place in Los Angeles and Riverside County, California, between 1926 and 1928. There's 3 known murder victims, an assumed 4th murder victim, which would be Walter Collins, because they never
found any of his remains or anything like that.
And possibly more.
Probably. Let's be real. Probably more.
Yeah. So Gordon Stewart Northcott, who I'll refer to as Stewart, and his mother Sarah Louise Northcott, or Louise, are our perpetrators in this case. Those are the people that got tried in the end.
Right.
So Stewart Northcott is the definition of a predator. He's a absolute monster.
Yeah.
And more so, this is Sanford Clark's survival story. Sanford Clark was Stewart's nephew, who he kidnapped and held captive for 2 years on his ranch. So the absolute horrific abuse that he endured, thank you, and just the horrific shit he saw, it's mind-boggling, and no child should ever have to go through it. So there are 2 books that you can check out to really dive further into this. The first one is called The Road Out of Hell by Anthony Flacco and Jerry Clark. Don't know if that is a descendant of Sanford Clark. I didn't get a chance to read that one. And then the second one that I read, that I did read, is Nothing is Strange with You by James Jeffrey Paul. Fantastic book. It does a lot of direct quotes from the trials. So some people don't like that. I personally liked it because it gives you a feel of how everyone speaks, and I personally like that.
I like that too. It's interesting.
So I'm going to come right out and say it. Big old trigger warning for this episode. This involves children, kidnapping, physical and sexual abuse, incest, and murder. So if you're not a fan of the cases that involve children, definitely skip this one.
It's got literally all of it.
All of it. I mean, if you want to hear me bitch about how awful Stewart Northcott is, then fast forward to those parts, because I will be doing that.
Right.
So I'm going to start with backstory on Stewart's parents. Then I'm going to go into kind of Stewart's backstory, and then go into when Sanford Clark officially came into the scene, I guess. When he kidnapped Sanford. I'll just say that. So reconstructing early life for the Northcott family is difficult because, 1, records. And the case took place in the 1920s, and records then were already kind of like,
Right.
But in the 1860s, when his parents were born, wow.
Don't know.
Also, they were pathological liars.
Right.
Stewart and his mother, Louise, and I think to some extent his father. Also, quick disclaimer. We were recording, but then my equipment stopped. So if some of these reactions, the first half of this episode, don't seem very genuine, it's because
I've heard it before.
We've already discussed it. So apologies. My equipment
recorded like 40 minutes worth, and she's like, oh, cool. It wasn't recording.
I haven't been recording. So a lot of information gathered was from the trials. So a lot about the early life came directly from the trials because, again, Shrug Records and Shrug Northcott family. I have to take a lot of what this family says with a grain of salt, honestly. So let's start with Stewart's parents. So his father was born, according to his death certificate, Cyrus George Northcott. He went by George. All the Northcott family went by their middle names, except Winifred. Maybe. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of strange.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe Winifred was her middle name.
Maybe.
Like, if you're going to go by your middle name, why didn't you name that as your first name?
I don't know, dude.
Like,
I
all
did
of them,
not
at least.
get it. I don't get it. So, according to his death certificate, Cyrus George Northcott, Stewart's father, was born September 18th, 1866 in London, Ontario. Not sure who his parents' names were. It was the 1860s. I mean, what are even records? But he grew up on a small farm, and he had a couple brothers. And there's a great little story of how his one brother, who was a doctor, was doing illegal abortions and accidentally killed one of his patients.
Oh, shit.
And then he was convicted on her murder like a decade later. So that's
fun.
fun.
A decade later?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I
damn.
believe it was a decade later.
Shit.
But I wasn't really paying too much attention to him because I was reading about Stewart being a terrible fucking person. So that's also quite fascinating. So Stewart's mother was born Sarah Louise something, don't know her last name, born in maybe Strathroy, sorry Canada, Ontario. Her exact birthday is kind of all over the place depending on the source, but it's sometime in August in the 1860s. I believe she was about the same age as her husband George, and she had two sisters. And I know there's a whole decade there of me being like, Shrug, around this time. Sorry.
Between this time and this time.
That's literally like
something.
The most accurate I can be without saying something wrong.
Let's just give her a birth date.
No.
No, because we hate her.
Exactly. So George and Louise met early in life and married sometime in 1886. Within the first few years of marriage, their daughter Winifred was born. Louise claims, because it's Louise, and I'll get into it. But before Stewart was born, she gave birth to 5 children in all. Only Winifred...
Okay, and that Winifred was included in those 5 children that she's claiming.
Yes.
Okay.
So only Winifred and a boy they named Willie survived. Several years before Stewart was born, Willie died at the age of 6 of pneumonia. Now, apparently, according to Winifred at Stewart's trial, at the time of Willie's death, Louise and George were separated, but ended up getting back together after the death of their son.
But if only they had stayed separated.
If we could turn back time, am I right?
If I could turn...
Shh, copyright.
I know. That's why I just... 3 words. You all can finish it.
Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, George was a man, again, according to Winifred at the trial, she claims that George was a man of highly nervous, violent, uncontrollable temperament and suffered from headaches. She said
which wouldn't help your violent temperament, let me tell you.
I get mad when I have regular headaches.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm that violent. So she said he was an atheist, but Louise came from an almost fanatic religious background.
Which is a great combination.
Yeah. They had children, but didn't seem to want to be parents. They didn't want the trouble and restrictions that came along with parenthood.
And those are always the people that can get pregnant so often.
That's what pisses me off the most. It's like there are so many fucking people who cannot have children.
And that want children and would be wonderful parents.
Can't afford to adopt with the ridiculous prices that it takes to adopt a child. And people like these fucking assholes can just be like, boop, 5 kids.
Yep.
Why? Anyway.
I know. It bothers me.
Sorry for my rant.
I don't even like kids, but I know there are people that want them so bad and can't have them.
And would be wonderful parents. Actually, you know what? I'm not fucking sorry. Anyway, so after Willie's death, Louise found out she was pregnant again. She was outraged. Like I said, she didn't want kids. And George even told her to destroy it at all costs. She tried to kill it by... we discussed this earlier. Violent jumping. I don't know what that entails. You can't picture it.
No, I'm picturing something. And it's crazy.
But yeah. So, like I said, the book said violent jumping. Excessive horse riding, and many other ways. And even 2 months before the child was born, George kicked Louise in the stomach so hard that he ended up injuring her spine somehow.
So he kicked her in the stomach and injured her spine.
I just said stomach. I didn't even have stomach written down. I don't know where he kicked her.
I was gonna say, if he kicked her that hard in the stomach, there's no way. I would assume that the baby would survive if he injured her spine if he kicked her there.
I don't know. I said stomach because I was on a roll. I don't know where he kicked her. It could have been in the shin and she fell down. I don't know.
Kicked her in the shin and injured her spine.
Yeah. So after the kick, Stewart was born. At first, Louise refused to look at him. She absolutely loathed him. And then, like a light switch, she was obsessed with him. Became absolutely devoted to this child. She gave him everything he wanted and didn't discipline him. And if someone were to discipline him in the slightest, it threw him into an uncontrollable rage, like tantrum.
Yeah.
And again, this is all according to Winifred at the trial. She apparently sent like a 3,000-word telegram to Stewart's lawyer.
Damn.
Yeah. But he literally read it. Stewart read it. And was like, she's crazy. And like threw it to the side.
She's crazy.
Yeah, she's crazy.
Sir,
okay.
You need to step down.
I don't know, dude. Fuck that family. Anyway, so Stewart, as we will see later, definitely was one of those people that lived in his own fantasy world. He kind of reminds me of Arthur Shawcross a little bit, because Arthur Shawcross, when you see interviews of him, he's kind of one of those people where everything he says is a fucking lie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way of proving or disproving what he's saying. But it's so convincing almost that you don't know if he's deliberately trying to deceive you or if he actually believes what he's telling you.
Right.
I could be wrong. But this is just, as an outsider, just looking in on this case and knowing...
And reading some of his shit.
Reading quotes by him, reading transcripts by him, how he speaks, and comparing him to Arthur Shawcross. Like, that's what it seems like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I could be wrong. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. Now, all this is from Winifred on the stand, so... Again, is it true? Could Winifred be a pathological liar like the rest of her awful family? I don't know. But from the outside, however, during the trial and from Sanford's testimonies, George was incredibly passive and seemed to let his son and wife dominate every part of his life. And he still continued to kind of weirdly support Stewart, even though at the trial both Stewart and Louise accused George of sexually abusing Stewart when he was young, but he continued to support Stewart. I don't know, man.
Maybe Maybe it's because he knew that they were telling the truth and was like, yeah, I still support you.
Maybe, I don't know, because there's no way to prove or disprove this.
Right.
And I would never want to be the person that says like, oh, I don't believe you who have claimed to have been sexually abused. But I have a hard time with this particular one.
Yeah.
Just because of what I've read about the family. Again, like, it could be true. I don't know. I do with that what you will.
Mm-hmm.
Make your own assumptions, I guess. Now, Louise's seesawing from hatred to obsession with her child is fascinating. George later said that it seemed like Louise was giving the love meant for Willie and giving twice as much love to Stewart.
Yeah.
I'm going to quote something that Louise said during, I think it was Stewart's trial, where she said, like, directly to him, just to show you how kind of gross it is. I don't know if I don't know if I want to call it an Ed Gein, or maybe not Ed Gein, but more like, what's the dude's name from Psycho? I never actually saw it.
I didn't either.
Like that. So, so she said to him in one of the trials, quote, "There could not have been any person kinder or better in any way than you have been to me. You are the only one that has ever brought any joy or happiness in my old gray life and has always used me right and giving me any love." I find that weird and gross.
So the beginning of it was okay. Nobody's been nicer and kinder to me than you have in my whole life. That's nice.
Yeah.
But when the end though, when she says something about used me.
You have always used me right and given me any love.
I don't
like that. It makes me uncomfortable. Also, you have a second child.
Correct. That's alive and well.
Uh-huh. You also have a husband too.
Correct.
I don't know, ma'am. I don't know.
I don't.
This is it's like their family dynamic. My God.
So it's not getting any better with this recording.
No, it's not.
It was worse than the first one, but now we're getting there.
It really is. But their family dynamic, it's very strange.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me, but whatever, man.
What do I know?
What do I know? I'm just a guy. So
in love with a girl.
Asking her to I'm done. So going from that, so there in the book, Nothing is Strange with You, one of the chapters actually when he's kind of like discussing some of the shit that George was saying in the trial.
Mm-hmm.
He had set, quote, it's name of the chapter actually, he had even said he is her God, referring to Stewart and Louise's relationship.
That's yucky.
Very gross. It makes me uncomfortable. And we're going to move on and not delve on it too much because it's gross in my opinion and I hate it.
Yeah.
So, Gordon Stewart Northcott. He was most likely born in 1906. His birth certificate at the time of his trial couldn't be found because, records.
Right.
So, I think by the time he was arrested, I'm wanting to say he was between like 20 and 23 years old.
Yeah, that's accurate. That's everything that I was seeing when I was looking through Walter Collins stuff.
Yeah, basically, I think he was 22.
Early 20s.
Yeah. Not very far into life, and you're already a huge fucking creep.
Right.
Anyway. Now, Louise is Stewart's mother. But Louise, during Stewart's trial, insisted that Stewart was the product of incest between George and their daughter Winifred. Even went as far as to say that she wasn't even present when Stewart was born. This is not true.
No.
So, again, I have no way of verifying claims that George was sexually abusing his children. I don't know. There's no way of knowing.
Could have been.
That could have very well have been possible. But even the midwife from when Stewart was born testified, and she was like, it was like a 40-year-old woman that gave birth to Stewart, not a teenager.
Yeah.
So Louise is Stewart's mother. Anyway, so Stewart was incredibly hairy. I really wish we could have had the reaction that you got from the first recording. I'm very upset about that. And you're like, I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't know what I was expecting you to say, but it wasn't hairy. Hairy was not the word I was expecting.
Well, he was hairy.
Gross, despicable, awful. All of those things were accurate, but and possibly what I would have been expecting. Not hairy.
Well, he was hairy. His body was covered in hair, so much so that George actually coined the nickname Ape Man for him pretty early in his life. When he became infamous after his arrest, newspapers even referred to him as Ape Man. And I'll explain later, and definitely read the books, because the book that I read anyway, again, Nothing is Strange with You, it went into a little bit more, because at the time when he was arrested and newspapers were like coming out with him and whatnot, they kind of took that nickname and ran with it.
Yeah. And
they pretty much kind of described him as, especially during that time, like anybody who murdered or was a serial killer of some sort, kind of, they described it as like an evolutionary
mishap.
What was the term that you used earlier?
Mishap.
Whatever. It didn't matter.
They were like going backwards in evolution.
He was reverting back
to his animalistic nature.
Exactly. Thank you again. My head.
Words are really hard.
Words are hard.
Hard. Words are hard.
So it's just another interesting. Like I said, the book goes further into it, and I won't go much further into it. Stewart hated being so hairy, which, I mean, I can't necessarily blame him.
I mean, if you're a little kid and very impressionable, and your dad is calling you an ape man and making fun of all of your hair, rather than trying to encourage you to accept how you look.
Yeah, or just purely being a dickhead, and instead of being like, oh, well, these came from my genes. That's why my child is so hairy. People are dicks. So, like I said, he hated it so much. He got a prescription for it, but it only partially worked. So I don't know if it was like it just thinned it out or left him patchy. I don't know.
Patchy.
So we call him Patches.
But like I said earlier, that just hit me. So, like what I said earlier.
And again, if you're a really hairy person and are patchy, I never want to make fun of you. I'm making fun of Stewart because he's a bastard. So then, again, like I said earlier, who knows what that prescription was actually. Cause it could have been fucking arsenic for all I know.
Could have been, because they did things like that in the 20s. Come on.
I know. Because it's like, oh, you have a headache? Here's some cocaine. Get rid of that headache real quick.
Put some pep in your step.
Right. You'll get a full 8-hour workday done in 2. So, during the trials, George and Louise claimed that Stewart got influenza around 1918 or 1919.
Yeah, Spanish flu.
Yeah, so that's the Spanish flu. Global pandemic. Yeah. And both of them claimed that he was kind of like mentally fucked up from it. They used the words, his mind was unbalanced for a period of weeks.
His mind was unbalanced throughout his entire
life
existence.
So again, I'm not going to go into it because Louise told a very long, very rambly story. Louise and Stewart are the kind of liars where they ramble and they tell these really long, very detailed stories. They're those kind of liars.
Without even answering the question?
Yes. and they'll like flip-flop back and forth. That's kind of what they do. They go back and forth with
It's their thing.
everything. It is. Fuck them. Anyway, so Louise claims that there's a doctor that can back it up and whatever. And he suggested like a change in climate and surroundings would help the mental condition, whatever. And then she's like, oh, his mind's never been right. No shit, Louise. And then she told like a long drawn out story after the influenza story that apparently he fell on ice.
Or maybe it was your violent jumping when you were pregnant with him.
Right. So, I don't know. Shrug, Louise. So, when Stewart was young, I'm not sure how old, Winifred married a man named John Clark. I'm not really sure what the age difference is between Stewart and Winifred, but
she had to be in her late teens when he was born.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if Louise's story of her giving birth to 5 kids before Stewart, I'm sure there was a period of time.
Yeah.
You know? Winifred and John had 4 children. Jesse, who was born in 1909, and Sanford, who was born in 1913. And at the time of the trial, or at the time of the arrests, Jesse was 19 and Sanford was 15. The 2 of them play a very, very significant part in this case. And then there are other 2 children, Kenneth and Edwin. But they don't really play much of a part in this. So...
Thank goodness, really.
Yeah. So when he was young, Stewart said that he acquired a love of music and literature. And he would say Beethoven was one of his favorite composers.
Whatever.
Yeah. So like I said before, Stewart lies constantly. He's a rambly sort of liar. So when he starts lying, he just starts weaving very detailed stories. So he did an interview after his arrest, and I don't know if it was a newspaper that interviewed him, or maybe it was during his trial. I'm pretty sure it was just in a press interview or something. They asked him like who his favorite composer was, or what his favorite,
because he loved music.
Yeah, so or like what his favorite song was or some shit.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, and I quote, "Well, some newspapers have credited me with one favorite and some with another. But here is a scoop. It is Perfect Day. Perhaps tomorrow I shall have another, but, well, isn't this a perfect day with all these visitors and this limelight? Now I ask you." End quote. Yeah. I know.
Yeah. So you
There's a lot
didn't actually answer the question.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Second of all, it's his mind is, once he starts something, then his mind goes in a different way, so then therefore the sentence goes in a different way. And then here's the scoop. That, yeah, fuck you. Just fuck you, sir. And, in the limelight, just...
In the limelight, uh-huh.
Yeah,
because
he
you
loves
murdered kids.
And
we'll get to it.
And he loves it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So while growing up, he would earn a living playing the piano in movie theaters. Because movies used to be silent.
Right.
And when you went to a movie theater, you had a piano player that would play music along with your silent film.
And that's so cool, but I hate that it was him that did it.
Yeah. And he would work at like various grocery stores. They lived in Vancouver for a time, which we love Vancouver.
Love Vancouver.
We love you, Canada.
So pretty.
It's so beautiful. And in August of 1924, George, Louise, and Stewart left Canada and decided to settle in California. Yeah. There's not really a clear reason as to why the move, and especially to a different country. They could have fallen on hard times, or they may have simply wanted a change of scenery, but I don't know. George found work as a contractor and a builder, while Louise worked in the laundry of the Los Angeles County General Hospital. Mm-hmm. Stewart claimed that he clerked part-time in a store and attended school, and also sold automobiles for a time, whatever.
He probably could have been a good car salesman.
Yeah, because he lies.
Well, and he probably would have you so confused as to what he's actually trying to say.
Yeah, like
that you're just like, okay.
Yeah, like
I am.
he starts saying bullshit, and then somehow you're in the store, pen in hand, signing a contract. Right. And like, when did I buy this car?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So they ended up moving around a lot during their time in Los Angeles. I don't know the reason for all the moves. I mean, like, I get it now because, you know, I lived in Los Angeles in the 21st century where rent was, you know, $2,000 or more a month. So who knows? Maybe that had something to do with it. Not the $2,000 thing, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, they probably didn't have to pay $2,000 rent back in 1920s.
No, I think they probably made $2,000 in like their entire lifetime.
Maybe.
But George and Louise did end up at a house on Britannia Street, which we will mention this again several more times.
And that's in LA.
Yes.
Okay.
All during this time, everything that was wrong with Stewart really started manifesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's unclear when Stewart started showing signs of pedophilia or when he began acting on these urges. There's really no way of knowing.
Right.
So while attending school in Los Angeles, Stewart made friends with a young man named Claude Scott, and Stewart frequently visited their home. And he really took a liking to Claude's little brother, Philip, who was between the age of like 9 and 12, depending on your source.
Gross.
Uh-huh. In July of 1925, the police, who were acting on a complaint from Philip, arrested Stewart on a statutory charge.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the source that you come across, some say that Stewart was either placed on a probation or the charges were dropped altogether. And, of course, the Scott family relocated not long after this happened.
Good for them.
I read they moved to, like, New Jersey or something.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, good.
Yeah, they were like, we're going to put as much space between us and this fucking monster.
Yes.
Anyway, so according to Sanford, the nephew, who I will mention soon, Stewart kept a stool at his ranch once it was built that Philip made in some sort of shop class, like manual something class.
Mm-hmm.
He would use it as a piano stool and would often sit and play Philip's favorite song, Song of Songs, then cry because he missed Philip so much, and then he would lose his shit and beat Sanford.
God, he's such a fucking creep.
Yeah. And just as an aside, which I know I'm kind of going back and forth between like trial and whatnot, but I feel like it's important just because of how much uncertainty there is around all this shit.
Right.
Because most of what we do know came from Sanford. So
yeah, that poor kid.
I know. So just as an aside, Stewart played a recording of Song of Songs in his jail cell the night before his execution. Because spoiler alert, he was executed.
Gosh, that's just yuck.
So in the spring of 1926, Stewart asked his father to buy him land that he had come across. He told George that he intended on starting a chicken ranch. So George bought several acres. I read 3. I think there may have been more. In a little town called Wineville in Riverside County. This is just outside of Los Angeles. But Stewart couldn't handle running the ranch by himself. So he decided to go back to Canada to take one of Winifred's children to help him. Now, at the time that he bought it, there was nothing on the land, so he literally had to build it from, ground up, but still. So he told his father his intentions, and then he left the next morning for Canada. Stewart drove up to Saskatoon. We love you, Canada. And spent around 2 weeks with his sister's family. He immediately set his sights on, at the time, 11-year-old Kenneth and 13-year-old Sanford. They met his age and gender requirements.
I wonder why he didn't just take both of them.
I don't know.
That's interesting. I guess it's easier to control one.
I don't know why, or I think it was like Kenneth didn't want to go, but Sanford was kind of like, "Oh, sure, I will." But he talked to both of them, And he told them that he wanted to take one of them on a trip to Regina, which is in Canada, I believe. He wanted to, go on vacation. So Winifred allowed Sanford to go with him with the pretext that they were going on a vacation to Regina. Mm. So he lied to his sister. Mm-hmm. So the day that they left, Stewart to Sanford was like, oh, surprise, you're coming to California and you're going to work on my ranch with me. So Sanford didn't protest. He was upset naturally, but Stewart was his uncle.
It was his uncle.
So Stewart lied to immigration at the border and told them that Sanford was a U.S. citizen. And naturally, he told a long, drawn-out lie along with this as well.
Well, so the officers were probably like, just get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, like, we don't care that he's illegal, just go. When they got to California, they stayed with George and Louise for about 2 weeks, because like I said, there was literally nothing at that ranch. It's just property at this point. They went to the ranch from George and Louise's home, and then they went to the ranch. So for about a week, Sanford and Stewart lived alone on the ranch and just cleared away weeds. They lived in a small tent where Stewart slept on a cot and Sanford slept on the ground. Mm-hmm. So with George's help, they began building structures. First the main house, then the garage, then 2 units for chickens. And when George would come out to the ranch to spend the night, again, just showing you really kind of diving into this family dynamic, when George would spend the night, he would sleep on the ground with Sanford while Stewart slept on the cot.
And at this point in time, his dad is elderly.
He's older, yeah.
He's got to be at least in his 60s.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What a dick.
Uh-huh. So again, this is another reason why it kind of, to me, feels like the more true story of his childhood would be like George is much more passive and just let his wife and child walk all over him. Mm-hmm. And Stewart clearly feels like he is above his father.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's what that looks like to me. So over time, more was built on the ranch. And by the time of Stewart's arrest, the ranch consisted of the main house, garage, 6 chicken units, rabbit hutches, a goat house, a brooder house, a grain house, and hen runs.
Damn.
There were also 4 other houses on the property that Stewart would like rent out, one of which was vacant often. Huh. So this was like Stewart's little kingdom. Like he was the king over his little shit kingdom. So Stewart would make Sanford get up between 5 and 6 a.m., water and feed the chickens, and then fix him breakfast. And Stewart would get out of bed once Sanford announced that breakfast was ready. That's when Stewart would get up.
Well, because my thing is, I mean, getting up between 5 and 6, going out and feeding water, and I mean, that's what you should do if you have some kind of farm. You know what I mean? That's the process. However, it is your farm, so you should be out there doing that with the child. Mm-hmm.
I know this. Sanford did about 95% of the work on the ranch. Pretty much all of the work, really.
Oh my gosh.
Stewart spent most of his time away from the ranch, in finger quotes, running errands.
Mm-hmm. Fuck him.
Mm-hmm. Stewart didn't let Sanford socialize with other people. There were a couple boys that lived nearby around Sanford's age, but Stewart would not let Sanford play with them. He also wouldn't let Sanford go to school.
Of course.
He was technically an illegal citizen, so if he did get caught, then he would be deported. But he didn't want him at school.
No, because he wanted him doing everything on the ranch.
Exactly. And when people asked, he would tell very, very detailed lies about this whole situation. There was even like a teacher that had showed up on the ranch a couple times, and Stewart wrote to whatever school board that she was hired by and like made formal complaints about this woman that was like, hey, why isn't your child in school?
Right.
Being a concerned person. Yeah,
Wow.
it was a whole thing. And Stewart dictated every letter Sanford wrote to his family, telling them all sorts of shit. What he would do is he would have Sanford write it, obviously in his handwriting.
So it'd be his handwriting.
So it'd be his handwriting, but Stewart would not let him mail it himself. He would mail everything. He would look over everything, read it, make sure it was everything that he wanted, or he would be like, change this to this. How about, you know what? How about you say this instead? Like, just let me start from the beginning. We'll rip this up, and then you can write a new one, kind of thing. He had no contact with the outside world. And so basically his entire world for those 2 years was Stewart, which is awful. And this actually made him lose track of days really easily.
Oh, yeah.
Because most of the time, I've noticed that when Sanford starts, like when he's testifying and when he comes forward with his statements and whatnot, every time that they'll ask for like a time frame, he'll usually say like, oh, about a week and a half. Because, I mean, which a week could be anywhere between like 3 and 7 days. Right. You know, you don't know. So this poor kid lost track of time, really. That was daily life for the two of them. So while they were staying with George and Louise before the farm was built, this is when Stewart began sexually abusing Sanford. And it continued while on the ranch.
Yeah.
Sanford would tell all this in court, and he said it would happen several times a week, and on occasion, Stewart would make them switch roles.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I'll get into that a little bit later. So, along with the sexual abuse came physical abuse.
Oh, yeah.
Stewart would beat Sanford with his fists or whatever objects he could get his hands on, and for literally any reason. Like, oh, Sanford wasn't working fast enough, or I'm just mad, beat Sanford. Like, that's what this poor kid's life consisted of. He would whip him, not with like a whip, but like a thin stick.
Like a switch.
Like a switch, yeah. And the neighbors that lived on the property would witness the abuse.
Oh my gosh.
An old neighbor of Stewart's actually said, I believe he told police, actually said one time when they were in the yard, Stewart whipped Sanford so hard with a long stick that the neighbor said that he could hear the licks from a distance.
Wow.
Yeah. Once Stewart threw a butcher knife at Sanford and it cut his wrist open.
Wow.
Stewart would pour hot water on him, and Sanford showed a lot of his scars in court.
That poor kid.
On his wrist, his head, his back. If you're wondering why Sanford stayed and didn't run away, Stewart threatened to kill him if he tried to do anything.
Yeah, and if you are a 13, 14-year-old kid and your uncle is telling you, I will kill you if you leave, you're going to believe him.
Yeah, and he's already done all this horrific shit to you already.
Yeah.
Who's to say that he wouldn't? And obviously, he does kill. So, of course, Sanford isn't going to give him any other reason to beat him more.
Right.
So, there was an article in the Los Angeles Evening Herald at the time of the trials that claimed that sometimes, along with beating Sanford, Stewart would make Sanford beat him.
Wow.
Now, this never came out during the trial, and it could not be true, but it's possible because sometimes the urge to punish kind of goes hand in hand with the urge to be punished.
Depending on your
psychology.
Yeah.
And it's definitely possible with someone like Stewart, who very clearly derived sexual satisfaction from pain.
Right.
So again, going back to the sexual abuse and how he would sometimes switch roles, it's possible.
Wouldn't be unheard of.
He's fucked up, so So, now going into the crimes. So, Sanford remembers 10 or 12 occasions, maybe. Like I said, this poor kid lost track of time. Where Stewart would drive off saying he was, in quotes, going away for fresh meat.
Oh, I hate him.
And bring back young boys, sexually abuse them, and then let them go. Always at night. The boys would be blindfolded. Just leaving that there for... Let that marinate. He would blindfold them and bring them back to the ranch so they didn't know where they were.
So they didn't know they were.
Stewart would make Sanford wait outside. And Sanford did tell this in court. Stewart would cover the windows with blankets and sheets. And he would be inside with the boys for like an hour and a half. And then he would take them back to wherever he abducted them from.
Wow. So he would actually take them back. He wouldn't just like let them loose.
Yeah.
And try to find their way home.
As far as I know, I think he took them back.
Ugh.
Because I don't think that he would just let them go, because then they could just
lead somebody back, possibly.
Exactly. So this was part of Stewart's MO for getting victims. I'll get to the murders, but I just want to really show how disgusting he is.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of young boys who testified at Stewart's trial. There were a lot who had been able to get away from Sanford trying to abduct them. And some that claimed that he did abuse them. One was a young boy of a mechanic who I'll mention later. His name was Stephen Black.
The boy was?
Yeah, he testified at trial. Again, I'll mention him later, but I'm going to go into, there's many others. But there's one boy who testified along with his father named Junior Thompson. I just kind of want to go into this a little bit because Junior quotes him when he testified, and I just want to really show you how disgusting Stewart Northcott was. So towards the end of 1927, so he's already in full swing, had his MO down pat. Junior was in Pickering Park. I don't know where that is, so sorry. I mean, the name's probably changed by now. Where both of his parents were working. He was in their sights, and he was like kind of playing around and like people watching and whatnot when he caught Stewart's eye, because Stewart was a predator and he prowled.
He was a disgusting pig.
Yes. So Stewart engaged with him, kind of like talked about whatever. And Junior, he walked away and he was like kind of doing something else, and he found a bench to sit on, and Stewart followed him to that bench. Now, Junior's father, I'll call him Mr. Thompson, he did see the two of them together, but obviously right away he doesn't think anything of it.
Right.
So Junior's sitting on this bench, and Stewart sits down and starts talking to him again. And he asked Junior if he wanted to make some easy money. Junior asked him how, and, quote, he said his nuts kind of tickled and he wanted me to play with them.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
So when Junior refused, because he was like, no.
Oh my gosh.
Stewart asked Junior if he wanted to go to his car to watch his dog do tricks. So, of course, he agreed, because what kid doesn't want to go see a dog?
Yeah. And it's the 20s, and your parents are probably not telling you to watch out for strangers.
Right. They went to Stewart's car. There was a little shabby-looking black dog in it. I honestly don't even know if it was Stewart's dog.
Probably not.
Or if he just found a dog and was like,
this could work.
There's that. Stewart suggested that Junior get in the car to take a drive, and, started trying to pull him into the car. But Junior was like, no, I don't want to go in there. So he tried to forcefully pull him into the car.
Right.
So Junior was able to get his arm away and run. Well, Stewart started chasing him. So Junior got to his father, and his father actually had a penknife on his person.
Oh.
So Junior tells his father, hey, this creepy fucker's, chasing me. So his father starts chasing Stewart away.
Good.
And there was a confrontation, but Stewart managed to like get away from him or something. Lost him in a crowd of people, but he did see him driving away, and he saw that he did have like a little like black looking dog with him. So when Mr. Thompson was cross-examined in court, he was asked what he planned to do with the penknife, and I'll quote this. He said, "Well, all I could."
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. So it's just a little bit into Stewart's MO, and just again how disgusting he is.
Yeah.
So exactly how many young boys Stewart sexually abused, or tried to anyway, we will probably never know.
Well, no, absolutely not, because it's probably I don't even want to think how many.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's kind of, did he start sexually abusing young boys before he lived on that ranch, or
Probably.
was it just I have these urges, I'm going to get dad to buy me my own place so I can fulfill them?
Yeah. Could be.
I don't know. So there were 2 years on the ranch where he literally did whatever he wanted. Mm-hmm. And just from the research, it was like he tried to fulfill every little urge he got. He was a legit predator. I mean, the moment he even caught wind of a young boy in any direction, he followed it and did whatever was necessary to get his prey, because that was prey. Like, this was all like a game to him.
Yeah.
And it was like, he's so gross. It's like someone was like, "Oh yeah, I have a son," and he'd be like, "Oh, you have a son? How old is he?" Like, just weird, just so disgusting. And then he'd be like, "Oh, you have a boy? Oh, he's how old? 10? Ooh, let's meet." Like, it's disgusting. Ugh. Just nasty. So we're gonna go into the murders now. So the known murders that we attribute to Stewart Northcott all occurred in 1928. So he was on that chicken ranch for almost a full 2 years before being like arrested and murdering people. So fast forward to February 1st, 1928. 1928 is wild. There's a lot in this year. Stewart told Sanford that he was going into LA. Didn't give a reason. That's just what he did. And around noon, Stewart got back. And again, everything that I'm telling you as far as little bitty details about the life is coming from Sanford.
Recollection?
Yes. So Stewart got back and told Sanford that he killed a Mexican man. This gentleman is referred to as the Headless Mexican in this case. So he took...
Because never was identified, right?
Never identified. So to prove that he killed someone, Stewart took a black tar pail out of the back of his car and showed Sanford what was inside, and it was a blood-soaked head, and it had long blackish brownish hair and had kind of darker skin. But
wow.
Yeah. Later they built a bonfire and in a drained duck pond behind the garage, and Stewart dumped the head into the fire along with clothes that he said belonged to the Mexican. And again, I'm going to be using Mexican because they later identify him as of Mexican ethnicity. Is that the term that I'm using?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm going to be referring to him as Mexican. I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but he was Mexican.
Yeah.
So the only details that Stewart told Sanford about this man was that he was shot. That he shot the Mexican because he knew too much.
Probably because he fucking saw him.
Who knows? And he left the headless body on the side of the road because, in quotes, he had no place to put it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No name.
The utter disregard.
Oh yeah. That's Stewart for you. He's a literal piece of shit. So never gave a name, no nothing. I mean, he hinted like a couple names. Like one of the names that they that you'll see along with this gentleman is shit. I don't even remember. It's Alvin Gothia or something of that nature. Stewart threw that out, but then he's also thrown out like another name. And I don't believe...
He probably doesn't even know his name.
He probably doesn't. I don't know. But either way, he was never identified. But the man's head burned all that afternoon until nightfall. And by the time...
It's surprising it continued to burn, though.
Yeah.
You know?
But by that time, only like a small piece was left. So they put the remaining piece in a bucket, broke it up with an axe, and placed it in sacks along with the ashes. And then Stewart left with it and was gone for like 45 minutes. Stewart says he disposed of them at a dump yard where he would normally take his garbage. But again, that's what Stewart said.
Yeah.
When he returned to the ranch, he told Sanford that they were going to his parents' home. So before and during the drive, he was coaching Sanford on what to say. So the story that Stewart came up with was that he hired the Mexican to help him on the ranch. He caught him stealing money, so he shot him.
Oh,
this
Jesus.
was the story that Stewart told. So between
like, were they just gonna come out and tell his parents, or is that the story that
they told George and Louise? But this is the story that they told them.
Well, they could have gone. First of all, okay, they could have just gone without telling them. They didn't have to come out and tell them.
I know this, Paige.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Stewart Northcott that we're dealing with. He's a fucking psychopath.
I know.
So,
but like, that's
who
the
knows?
dumbest thing. Like, coaching and getting a story just in case somebody comes a knocking, but like just to come out and say, "Hey, by the way, we killed a man.
We killed
but
this guy."
This is what happened.
He was stealing, and even though every time that he did like tell us, I'll get to it. So between 8:30 and 8:45 the next morning, so fast forward to the next morning, a farmer was driving along Hudson Road near Puente when his dog, which was running beside his car,
that's so wholesome,
right? He started barking, and then the farmer noticed an arm sticking up out of the weeds in a roadside ditch. The book told his name, but I didn't really think it was super necessary, so I'll leave him anonymous.
Yeah.
So he stopped to investigate. The body was covered by a sack from its shoulders down, and he saw that it clearly didn't have a head.
Right.
And this really dates this case. He drove to a fire station in Puente and asked the sheriff's office be notified.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Oh, man.
Right.
Oh, Mario.
Oh, Mario. So around 9:30, the police show up. There were probably 5 or 6 men there, one of them being a district attorney, which took me back to the Sequina case.
The circuit clerk shows up on scene.
Right. So they noted 2 wounds, the cut to the neck, obviously, and a bullet hole surrounded by a large powder burn just below the right nipple.
So, shotgun?
No.
Oh.
They thought the head looked like it had been cut off with a knife or an axe. Which, again, I'm like, okay, that's probably not a leap. But okay.
Right.
And again, this is all from the police. Because I will get, they did do an autopsy, of course, and I'll tell you the findings of that as well. So the body appeared to have been a Mexican man between 16 and 18. He was nude and had no identifying marks.
Right.
Now, the book said that the body had no identifying marks except those left by a bathing suit that he'd worn recently. So that's all it said, but I'm assuming that means he had a tan line.
Oh, maybe.
Again, that's what I'm assuming that meant.
I didn't,
but that was all the detail that it gave me.
That didn't come to my head at first. What came to my head was just like, after you have a pair of underwear on all day long and you take them off,
the
and
elastic
there's
marks
the
are
elastic
like on
marks.
you.
Yeah, that's what I thought of. But then I'm like, it would have probably worn off the next. I don't know.
It could be either. I don't know.
Tan line would make more sense, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's just all it said.
Yeah.
So there were bloody finger marks on the right arm. It was clearly left by whoever had dumped the body, but it was smeared, so a fingerprint couldn't be taken from it. They also noted that his hands were soft, without calluses, like he had never done hard labor.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so this was all noted by the police at the crime scene. Now, the pathologist found that it was a Mexican male, 18 years old. I don't know how they got the exact age, or if they were just pulling, I don't know. 5'5", estimated weight of about 140 pounds, with dark brownish black hair. So the gunshot wound entered from the right side of the chest with an upward trajectory to the left, and they did manage to recover the .22 caliber bullet. Also, I can mention that Stewart has a .22 rifle. Just saying.
So, like, possibly stuck it up?
Entered the right side of his chest going up. I'm sorry, I'm doing the motion. I'm doing the motion. So it went through his chest and kind of up. So, I don't know. To me, that seems like someone who was sitting down and shot him.
Or, I mean, standing there next to him and just happened to bring the gun up. But that would make more sense if it was a pistol. If it was a rifle, then that would be harder to just, take this long gun and just, interesting.
Man. So, the cuts to the neck were fairly clean. The skin was unbruised, so they believed the decapitation was done post-mortem. Thank goodness.
Oh.
They believed death had taken place within 24 hours before the body was found.
Okay.
The gun had been fired from a distance of about 2 to 3 feet away, which makes sense for the large powder burn as well.
Well, if they think it was 2 to 3 feet away, then that disproves my theory of standing right next to somebody and sticking the gun up and like flush to the skin,
Well, it could have still been kind of the same situation. I don't know. Like that's not known.
That's weird.
So the gun had been fired at a distance of about 2 to 3 feet away, but the wound wasn't immediately fatal. They said that death probably happened about 30 minutes later from a hemorrhage as the result of lacerated lung tissue.
Oh my goodness.
And they examined his rectum and they determined that he hadn't been sodomized. So,
wow.
Silver lining,
if you can take something
good
out of that, at least that he didn't have to suffer that.
Yeah. So now the stomach contained a small amount of a custard or some sort of light, maybe like tapioca custard. Now, this is interesting because Stewart would flip-flop on confessing to this murder. But when he did, because, he's very like, yeah, I did. No, I actually didn't. That sort of thing, because he's a fucking prick. But when he did confess, he would always claim self-defense, that the Mexican man came at him with a knife, whatever. So in one of the stories that Stewart told about this murder, when he was admitting to it, he told this long, I read,
right.
The whole thing is quoted in the book that I read because it's so ridiculous. It's very long, very dramatic, almost theatric, perhaps, of how and why he shot this man. And in this story, he claims that he fed this man some sort of light custard. Which is strange.
Why?
I don't know. He claims, basically, shorthand of this story was that he hired this guy, brought him back to the house, was like, hey, do you want something to eat? We're making dinner. And the man was like, no, thank you. And he goes, okay, well, would you like some dessert? I have some custard here. And he was like, sure, I'll take some of that. And then it was just really dramatic and like, oh, how dare you take my money? Just stupid. It's ridiculous. I'll let you read it. It's so dramatic.
I don't want to read it because I hate him.
I know. I almost want you to because it's so ridiculous. Now, this could mean one of three things. So, either the story is true, which I doubt.
Yeah.
Partially true. Or maybe this information was somehow in a news article and he read about it, because I'll mention it later, but he was a fan of himself.
Oh, you can clearly see that.
He loved to read news articles about missing boys that he was responsible for. So that's what I'm assuming in this case.
Yeah.
Because he told this story after he was caught, but not like officially in jail yet, and I'll explain later. So this man who, like I said, in this case was referred to as the Headless Mexican, was never identified. So there's like a theory that maybe Stewart was involved in some sort of child prostitution ring.
Oh.
Then that, along with this theory as to why this man was killed, was that maybe Stewart was involved in this child prostitution ring, and maybe this man was a customer or a rival businessman. I'm saying that in heavy quotations. And that's maybe like, what did he know? Stewart said he knew too much. What does that mean? Me personally, I don't think that he was involved in any sort of child prostitution ring, because Stewart was very selfish and very private.
Right.
And like
exactly.
to do all his weird little shit by himself on the ranch.
Right.
So I highly doubt. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not possible, because he was gone all fucking day, almost every day from the ranch, leaving Sanford to work by himself. But
right.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I just doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we know about this gentleman.
Well, and let's be real. If they think that he was 18, he was still a child himself.
Yep.
So who knows what the real reason was?
We don't know.
Nobody will ever know what
Probably
the real
not.
reason is.
No.
Was.
So now we're going to move on to Walter Collins. There were claims that Stewart actually knew who Walter Collins was years before his abduction.
Oh.
An old boss of Stewart's at a grocery store claimed that Walter was a regular at their store, and that's how Stewart was able to set his sights on Walter. But I don't think there's any way to verify that.
Well, no.
Again, just one of the many people testifying at the trials. So Walter disappeared on March 10th, 1928, from, I believe, not far from his home.
Right.
So,
well, his mom had given him some money to go to the movies that day.
Yeah.
So,
of course, we know from last week we got into Christine and Walter Collins, but according to Christine, at the time of his disappearance, Walter was 4.5 feet tall, wearing a brown and red and black lumber jacket, brown corduroy trousers, black Oxfords, and a gray cap. So
the precious little boy
baby
look.
And pictures of him, he's
precious.
He's precious. Absolutely precious.
Yeah, I posted a newspaper clipping of when he went missing.
Yeah.
Last week after last week's episode.
And he's a very cute little boy. So when she reported him missing, it was a nationwide search with no results.
Right.
So Louise had taken time off in March, and she was at the ranch between the 13th and 16th. Because apparently, according to Sanford, Stewart had been away from the ranch on a vacation of some sorts for maybe a week, and Louise was minding the farm while he was away. So Sanford said that Stewart had returned from his little vacation with Walter. And during the time Walter was there, which may have been a week, Stewart kept him in one of the hen houses with a cot and blankets and sexually abused him while he was there.
Right.
Sanford claimed that it was Louise who decided that Walter had to die. She told Stewart and Sanford that each of them would strike a blow, and in quotes, if we're ever found out, we will all be equally guilty.
Ugh.
So I know. So according to Sanford, all three of them went into the hen house that night. It was completely dark, with Sanford holding the only flashlight. So please imagine how terrifying that would have been for Sanford.
Yeah.
So Walter was sleeping on a cot, and using a large axe that they brought with them, all three hit Walter in the head with it. Stewart went first, hitting him several times. Then Sanford only hit him once, and then Louise several times. Then they buried him. I don't know if it was the same hen house or another one. I'm wanting to say it was the same. Sanford says that Walter's body was only buried in the henhouse for a short time when Stewart decided to dig him up. They dug until they got to his already decomposing body.
Yeah.
And they poured an entire barrel of quicklime into the grave and then buried him again. And when some more time passed, Stewart dug him up again.
Oh my gosh.
Burned what was left of his body and then took the remains somewhere.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, you wonder why his remains were never found.
There was nothing left of him.
Right.
I mean, there may be some remains of his body in that ground still, but
it'd be fragments.
Very, very small fragments.
Oh my goodness.
Louise's story was completely different, naturally.
Of course.
It was very rambly and filled with unnecessary detail. I won't even go into detail about hers because it's just too much and it's bullshit. At first, she was denying that she was involved in a murder.
Mm-hmm.
Like basically, like her stance, her conclusion at first was like, "Oh, we were keeping him, and he just, I don't know, I just walked out to feed him, and he was dead."
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. So at first, she was denying it, but then she confessed to his murder
and said she was the only one that did it. Correct? Because that's what I had come across when I was researching for Walter.
I'm not sure. I'll have to look back on it.
That's what I had said. She was the one that said I was the one that killed him. Stewart didn't do anything. I was the one that killed him. But then later on, like years down the road, she recanted.
Yeah, she did eventually recant. But this is kind of like what she does, like how Stewart does.
Right,
very
exactly.
wishy-washy, very back and forth. There was a quote from her in the book. I don't remember what it said, but I don't remember what the details were. But she did confess to it. I'm not quite sure if she may have pointed a finger at Stewart as well. I don't remember off the top of my head, but either way, she was the only one tried for Walter's murder.
Right.
And again, I'll get to it. Now, Stewart claimed that Walter had to die because Walter had witnessed Stewart killing a miner, like a person that works in a mine, a miner.
Oh, like an actual miner, M-I-N-E-R.
Yeah, not a miner as in like I'm under 18. A miner as in like I work and I get coal.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
So of course there's a long story along with his claim.
Right.
And I won't bother going into it because Stewart.
Right.
But there is some strange Stewart movement after Walter's death. So he rented a cabin, which was basically a shack, in Mint Canyon in March after Walter's death.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a mine near it, which is where, according to Stewart, he shot the miner he claims that Walter saw. I don't know, man. It's
so
Stewart.
Sanford didn't see this. Apparently, he was elsewhere.
Supposedly. Again, this is coming from Stewart. This isn't coming from Sanford. This is Stewart's reason as to why he killed Walter. So I'm not sure when, but law enforcement, but law enforcement did search here. I like I said, I don't know when it was. I'm assuming it was around the time of like the arrests and the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not sure. There was no evidence that anyone had been killed there, but they did find several pairs of young boys' shoes. One pair that had been partially burned. That straw had been removed from a mattress on the floor and burned in the kitchen stove. And a well near the shack had been filled in recently around the time of the search.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Police spoke with the owners that Stewart rented it from, who naturally he gave a crazy story to them as well.
Right.
As to who he was.
Right.
And what he needed the shack for.
Mm-hmm.
The owners and the neighbors around the shack didn't even know how long Stewart made use of this place. A rancher nearby claimed that the night after Stewart rented the cabin, someone built a bonfire on the property that burned for over 4 hours.
Wow.
So, I mean, if that was him, he was getting rid of evidence, obviously.
Right.
And a neighbor that was in charge of overseeing this rental property, in lieu of owners, said that when Stewart moved in, he only brought a pick, a shovel, and a spare tire with him.
Interesting.
I don't know. So that was just some little weird Stewart movements.
A spare tire.
So now we're fast forwarding around to May 16th, 1928. Again, this is all in 1928. So you have the quote-unquote Headless Mexican in February. You have Walter Collins in May. And
March.
now... Is that what I said?
Yeah, March 10th is when Walter disappears.
My days run together really bad. So we have Walter Collins in March, and now we're on to May. So May 16th, around 6:30 p.m., two brothers, 12-year-old Lewis and 10-year-old Nelson Winslow, asked their mother if they could go to the Model Yacht Club, where they had programs, I guess, where boys could make and build all sorts of little stuff. So their mother didn't want them to go out that night because she was feeling kind of sick, but she gave them the whole, okay, you can go out, but you got to be back in an hour kind of thing.
Right.
So they left their home in Pomona and walked about 6 or 7 blocks to the yacht club just to show that these were children. Lewis took a book with him that he checked out from the library a few days prior.
Oh.
So at the yacht club, they worked on little models and,
So they did make it to the yacht club.
They made it to the yacht club. One of them, Nelson, I think it was working on this little, it gave two things. It was either like a little banjo or a ukulele that he was building. So they were so focused that they lost track of time. Suddenly it's 8:30 and they were like, shit, mom's gonna be mad.
Right.
So they left quickly. Lewis left with his library book and Nelson carried again, either a ukulele or banjo. I'm just going to call it a ukulele. He left with his ukulele that he was working on. So fast forward to around 10 p.m. Sanford was sitting up waiting on Stewart to get home because he was gone all day. And Stewart pulled up and yelled at Sanford to come out. In the driveway, Stewart tells Sanford that he has some friends of his there. He instructed Sanford to get things fixed up in the hen house for them.
Oh my gosh, I hate him so much.
Lewis, this one's rough, guys. I'm just going to say this right now. Lewis and Nelson were waiting in the car, and Stewart went in the house, and Sanford took some bedding, water, whatever else, into the hen house. So Stewart instructed Sanford to put nails in the door from the outside so they couldn't escape.
Right.
But there was a hammer in the hen house so Stewart could pry open the door to let himself out.
Oof.
Sanford slept in one of the vacant houses on the property that night while Sanford stayed in the hen house. I guess the main house was in the process of getting plastered, so they were sleeping in the incubator house, which it's hen house, incubator house, whatever. So they were actually staying in one of the hen houses.
Huh.
But that night, Stewart was in the hen house with Lewis and Nelson, so Sanford stayed in that vacant house that I said.
Right.
The next morning, Stewart came to the house so Sanford could make him, Lewis, and Nelson breakfast. Of course, he didn't take the boys out of the hen house. He left them in there and took food to them. That same day, Stewart told Sanford the boys' names, where he picked them up, and why he brought them. And you know what his favorite thing, his choice of words were? To do them.
Oh, that son of a bitch.
So the boys were held captive for about a week and a half. And again, this is according to Sanford, so this poor boy, he
probably didn't even know, to be quite honest.
So almost week and a half, almost 2 weeks. Let's just say that. So Sanford would bring them water, change their chamber pot, and make their beds, the cots that they had. He didn't spend time with the boys because Stewart controlled every part of their time there. Lewis and Nelson, when not being abused, spent their time playing cards and drawing.
Oh my goodness.
George and Louise didn't visit the ranch when the Winslow boys were there because Stewart made the effort to tell them that he had people at the ranch and he didn't want them there.
Wow.
So he would even show Sanford newspaper articles about the missing boys, like I said earlier. Like I said, he was a fan of himself. And to throw people off more, he had the boys write letters to their parents.
Oh my gosh.
Like Sanford, like he had with Sanford. So one of them read, I'm going to read it. Quote, "Dear Mother and Dad, we are going to Mexico to make a lot of money making yachts and airplanes. A woman gave us something to eat. Don't worry, we will be okay. Louis and Nelsie."
Oh my gosh.
So
I hate him.
I do too. There were more letters that he made them write, and I'm sure they were dictated in a similar fashion to Sanford's letters to his family.
Mm-hmm.
And he even had the boys ask, like, oh, are our names in the papers yet? Like I said, he's a fan of himself.
Wow.
So either on the 25th or the 26th, Stewart told Sanford that the boys needed to go. So Stewart said that they would use an axe so it wouldn't make noise. So taking a page out of the book from Mother Dear.
Right.
And of course, Sanford had to keep going along with everything he said because he was scared.
Well, yeah.
And Stewart always threatened to kill him if he ever tried anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he's already killed, so it's like, of course he would kill me.
Right.
You know? Early morning on the 26th, Sanford began digging a grave in one of the hen houses, which took him until nightfall to finish it because in the middle of the day, Stewart decided to try to kill Lewis with ether. So he took Nelson in the main house, and this is like the middle of the day, like 3 or 4 p.m. He took Nelson in the main house and left Lewis in the hen house where they were being kept. So with Sanford's help, they laid Lewis down on one of the cots. They put a rag over his face and poured almost an entire full can of ether onto the rag.
Oh my gosh. So essentially waterboarding him too in the process.
Basically. And Lewis, like ether is what they, in case anyone doesn't know, ether can be used as a
sedative.
Like in lieu of anesthesia.
Yeah.
Basically. You don't want to inhale it.
No, that's the whole point.
Exactly. So Lewis did pass out for a minute.
Yeah,
but
I bet he did.
It didn't kill him. He eventually came to and vomited.
Yeah.
So Nelson was brought back into the hen house, and Stewart decided that they were going to kill the boys that night with an axe, and that Sanford would have to participate. So that night, Lewis was sent to the main house. They sat Nelson on a chair while Sanford stood in front of him and like kind of off to the side and was just talking to him, like about the chickens, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then Stewart came up behind him and hit him with the blunt part of the axe.
Oh my gosh. Like the axe head, but on the other side?
Uh-huh. So Nelson, again, this is in Sanford's words, made a gasping noise.
Yeah.
And then fell to the floor. Stewart hit him 2 or 3 more times and then handed the axe to Sanford and then said he was going to go outside to see if there was anyone outside. Because, of course. Sanford put down the axe and instead grabbed a small hatchet and hit Nelson in the head with the blunt end a couple more times. So Nelson was still alive. He was making some noises. Stewart came back in, picked him up, and took him to the hen house with the dug grave and put him in it still alive.
Mm.
So in court, Sanford said that when Stewart went into the house to get Lewis, Nelson was still making, in his words, awful noises.
Yeah.
So Sanford started putting dirt over his face to try and make the noises stop, but they didn't.
Oh my gosh.
So in between the murders, Stewart informed Sanford that this time he would have to strike the first blow with Lewis. So the same process was repeated with Lewis. This time, Stewart was in front, sitting. They had him sitting on the same chair, and Sanford came up behind him with the hatchet. When he fell to the ground, Sanford hit him several more times, and then Stewart hit Lewis several times with the axe. Lewis was also still alive when they put him in the grave.
I can't believe that.
I honestly can't either, but they were both still living after being hit in the head several times with axes. Lewis was also still alive when they put him in the grave, and they placed him next to Nelson, both facing the same direction. They then filled the grave, put straw over it, and then put chickens in the hen house.
Oh my goodness.
So they technically buried those boys still alive.
Ugh.
So they cleaned up the hen house where the murders took place and cleaned up all the blood that they could find from moving them around.
Yeah.
They took the dirt with the boys' now clotted blood and put it in the road, like in front of the house, and just spread it everywhere. And everything the boys had while they were being held captive was burned. So the
library
book and the homemade ukulele.
Oh my gosh.
Was burned.
Oh.
So these are the last known murder victims of Stewart Gordon Northcott. The last known. I'm going to put that in very, heavy last known.
Right.
Because there could be more. Because
I guarantee there was more.
Oh, I'm sure. So after the Winslow boys were killed, Stewart's appetite kept growing.
Yeah.
So he made the decision that he wanted to take an entire family captive.
Like parents as well?
Kill parents to get to children, basically, was kind of his goal. Wow. And this is where I'm going to leave you for part 1. So I'm really sorry, but when I kind of started digging into this, I just kept getting more and more and more. These are the last known murders, and I still have a whole bunch of shit to get to.
Oh my goodness.
Honestly, these murders were too horrific to go without detail. I know that sounds bad because these are children, but I feel like people like this, you need to know what kind of fucking monsters these people are.
Yeah.
And what these boys went through.
So his mom was really only present for Walters.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
But she knew about the quote-unquote Headless Mexican.
Well,
she knew about him.
But present and active in Walters.
Yes.
Oh.
But she knew what was going on at that ranch. She knew. So did the father. Just letting you know. So it gets even more bonkers. No, maybe not even more, but it's still gonna be bonkers because now
disgusting.
We've reached almost the peak. We have a little bit more ways to go, and then it's a crazy just spiral until the arrest.
Ugh.
So I'm really sorry. I know this is going to be a little bit of a long one, but I just wanted to get right into it and get everything out. And then next week we're going to do a part 2, and I'm going to finish it all up in part 2. So part 2 is probably going to be a little bit long too, because I don't want to drag this out for a 3rd episode and spend more time talking about Stewart, because fuck him. Because I read too many quotes by him, and now, like I said, I just want to slap him. So I want to do more than slap him, but that's
he's already dead.
He's already dead.
So I mean,
whatever. So
yeah.
Sorry, this one was so rough. I definitely cried a little bit when I read this book. When I got to the Winslow boys, it was very upsetting because there's a few minute little details that I decided to omit for the podcast.
Yeah,
it was awful.
Well, we will do a live video at the or go live on Facebook at the Bicentennial.
Yes,
to hopefully
let's go to more lively things now.
So, yes, so we will go live on Facebook at the Bicentennial to hopefully give a little light and spooky in between this horrible bullshit of the fucking Northcott family.
Yeah.
So, that way So if you don't already like us on Facebook, you can like us on Facebook at.
This is my thing.
I
do
know.
it, and then you do the social medias.
I know.
So you
I'm
can like us on
switching
Facebook.
it up.
No. So you can like us on Facebook at
2KY.
You can like us on Instagram. You like us on Instagram at
2KY podcast.
And we have a YouTube channel.
2KY podcast.
And we have a Gmail if you'd like to contact us and suggest something.
2KY podcast at gmail.com.
And every time you type the word 2, it's actually the number 2, just 2K away.
Mm-hmm.
Again, last time we are going to be at in Butler, Illinois, the Montgomery County Bicentennial. Again, we're going to have a booth. This is my last chance to get that out there. We're going to be selling some merch.
We'll remind you on Facebook and Instagram.
Yes, for sure. Probably on Friday. We'll remind people.
At some point.
So
follow us.
Some point this week. So follow us. We've been getting some messages recently, like some people in other states, like suggesting things, and we're really excited about it. So stay tuned for that. We do have some suggestions from some of our friends that we will be getting to eventually, but there were some other ones that we just like wanted to kind of get out there first.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to your suggestions. We promise we're going to get to suggestions because we've had really great suggestions.
Really great ones.
So we will get to them eventually. But thank you so much for joining us this week for the Wineville Chicken Coup Murders Part 1. Again, there's just too much, and it's too gnarly to just put into one episode. There's, like I said, I just kept finding more. It was like there's, this is what I was expecting, and then it just kept going and going and going and going. So I was like, a lot of it I think was important to really show the person that Stewart is.
Yeah.
Or not was.
Was.
Not is, but was. I think it's important to this just to give you like a really full idea of who he was as a person.
Yeah.
So yeah. So thank you for joining us. And
we hope to see you at the Bicentennial if you are able to come.
If you are able to come.
And then you'll hear this part 2 next week.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Bye.
Bye.